So this video is a follow-up on the conversation that Mike, Emmolina and I had at the Concove Tūhura Insights to Action Conference in August 2025. So both Mike and Emmolina are involved in leading pilots of degree-level apprenticeships, and we had a really engaging and positive conversation as a panel at the conference. We managed to answer a few of the questions that were posed to us by the conference attendees, but we didn't get through them all. So we thought it would be great if we took some time to answer the many thoughtful questions that were posed. Before we get into the conversation, though, I'd like to acknowledge that today the government has announced the formation of a university strategy group to drive coordinated action across the university sector, and one of the priorities for that group will be exploring degree apprenticeships. That's obviously a major milestone for the work that Emmolina and Mike have been leading, and it's a real signal of support for the model, which really is, we think, the future of tertiary education and training. So congratulations to you both, but let's get started. You're both well known in the tertiary education sector and within the industries that you work with, but could you perhaps briefly introduce yourselves? Perhaps Mike, you first, and then Emmolina, before we get into the questions and answers.
Kia ora. Thanks, Brenden. Mike Crossan, toku ingoa. I am a strategic advisor, products and portfolio at the Open Polytech. I've been in the education sector, tertiary education sector now for 23 odd years, mostly focusing on manufacturing and engineering. So yeah, really looking forward to it. Over to you, Emmolina.
Thank you, Mike. Kia ora, everyone. My name is Emmolina May. I'm the academic member of the Toyo Homai and leading the DLAs for quantity surveying program, as well as wearing the hat of Education Committee Chair of NZQS, which is one of our lovely industry engagement supports. Myself also working as a registered quantity surveyor in the industry, that providing the connections as well as the industry practice back to the tertiary education sector. Thank you.
Wonderful. So very, very warm welcome to you both, and welcome to all of those of you at home listening to this recording. So we're just going to work through the questions that we received at conference in order, and we'll start with the first one for you, Mike. What makes this an apprenticeship rather than just studying while working?
Well, the defining feature is that the workplace is a primary site of learning. Unlike a standard degree where work experience is a bolt-on, degree-level apprenticeships rest in a tripartite agreement. Learner, employer, and provider all share responsibility. The learner is both a student and an employee. The employer is a co-educator, and the provider ensures a degree integrity. This model is well established in France and Germany and the Netherlands and the UK, and increasingly in the USA. In those countries, it's a normal option, not a pilot on the margins. Our challenge in New Zealand is to normalise it here. From an Open Polytechnic perspective, using the learning that occurs in the workplace as part of the program for assessment, for reference and reflection, adding value back to the workplace with critical analysis and research. The DLA, or Degree Level Apprenticeship, is designed to be of value for the employer as much as it is for the learner.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mike. And I think these sorts of initiatives are really well aligned with the kind of signals that government's sending,
Yes.
both through the tertiary education strategy and plan guidance. But that does lead us to our next question, which is for you, Emmolina. How committed do you think TEC is to funding degree-level apprenticeships?
Well, the TEC's investment guides for higher education has already set 3 priorities that align very, very well with our DLAs. Those 3 guidelines are the initiatives, models of delivery like work integrated and employment-based learning, as well as the flexible options for learners, including part-time study that fits work and family and other commitments lives, and as well as the recognition of the prior knowledge and skills that the learners gained throughout their lifetime and or other careers that they have gained through. What is missing there, though, is an explicit reference to the DLA as our degree-level apprenticeship. A simple adjustments to the the TEC annual plans guidance could be legitimized of them as a normal and fundable part of the higher education, which is what we would like to see.
Yeah, and I think we certainly see those signals of legitimacy as being really, really important to encourage and incentivize people. You'll all, and those of you listening, will be familiar that the way the funding system is organised does have quite a sharp distinction between on-job and off-job training.
Yep.
It's less of an issue at degree level. But Mike, I think folks are interested in what you see as the mix of on-job and off-job training that we need for these programs.
Yeah, that was a good question, and I think it comes from understanding what an apprenticeship is and saying there's so many hours, but it really will depend on the outcome that's being achieved. There's no required number of hours. The learner will decide what works best for them. There's no single ratio, and that is by design. The principle is that the workplace is a primary site of learning. Beyond that, industry and professions can shape their own expectations, and the needs for individual learners should take precedence. For some roles, possibly like nursing, more off-job theory may be essential. For others, like possibly construction and management, the bulk can happen in the workplace with targeted academic modules. The flexibility allows us to match the right blend of the learner's context, but the golden rule is that the competence develops and is assessed in the workplace alongside the work that they do online.
Fantastic. And I think the idea that you're using the workplace as the primary place of learning is a really powerful one. And I think in New Zealand, we've got a real opportunity here because we don't have hard and fast rules about the proportions that sit in the workplace and are off job. You've got an opportunity there, I think, to shape these solutions. Interesting always, but how the funder and the regulator think about these things. So, Emmolina, what's been NZQA and TC's reaction to this initiative?
Well, we have touched base on the TEC side of things, but for the NZQAs, we have developed an enabling framework that identify exactly what is needed. And the NZQA has been very supportive in principle, but was cautious, focusing on how the safeguard of the assessment and the moderations in workplace settings, which can be very challenging as the levels are quite different. And the TECs has also welcomed the pilots, but has yet to create a dedicated funding mechanism, as mentioned earlier. The framework proposed clear next step, though, is the NZQA would added worked examples of DLAs into the degree approval guidance, and the TEC should be offering, in principle, the funding approval to de-risk of the program development.
Thanks, Emmolina. Yes, and that enabling framework that you mentioned is one of the key artifacts of the Concove project that we're working on and will be released in due course. But it really sets out a set of quick wins and bolder steps that government could take, which we hope will inform the work of this new university group as well as the rest of the system. So I think we've heard from your answers a real signal. Actually, there's an openness to this, some welcoming of the initiative, and a lot of flexibility. But at conference, one of the questions we got was, why the hold-up? What's the biggest barrier here? Given that we've got traditional apprenticeships, we've got over 100,000 people doing them at the moment, and they've been delivered successfully for decades or even millennia. What makes degree-level apprenticeships more complicated or complex? Mike?
Well, some officials would argue that there's no barriers and the providers could already build degree-level apprenticeships within existing settings. But in practice, barriers are very real. Apprenticeships are still defined at level 4. Funding flows favour campus-based delivery, and cultural assumptions divide the academic from vocational. Level 7 is not an area where traditional apprenticeship study occurs, and with it comes a much higher level of research and critical thinking. Degree-level vocational study is less about recall and skill development, and more about critically analysing options, designing and implementing responses, then critically analysing those results. On top of that, analysis shows that degree-level apprenticeships can cost up to 40% more to deliver because of employer engagement, learner support, and co-design costs, and all the other bits and pieces. Without funding and policy adjustments, the degree-level apprenticeships could look too risky to providers, even when employers are eager to back them.
And certainly that's a big challenge I think we've faced in terms of communicating the opportunity here. Although fair to say the surveying that we have done, limited as it is, of employers showing really strong interest both in the model and their willingness to offer apprenticeships to these people. Speaking of the learner and the employee, one of the questions we got, Emmolina, was with young people expected to have 5 to 7 career changes over their lifetime, how do you see this impacting degree-level apprenticeships?
Well, to start from myself, I am choosing my current career pathways. It's not my first one off school, and this become more and more common in the young generations as well. So the reality actually is strengthening of the case for DLAs and the pathways that do not just train for a single job or a single career pathway, but more build for a portable professional skills such as like the problem solving skills, the communication skills, and research in a practice and in a practical way. So, but to serve the learners over a lifetime, the DLA need a stronger credit transferring and recognition prior learnings and stackable pathways so that if someone do decide to change their career pathways and their investment in the earlier of the learnings that still counts and still can recognize of their valuable life skills as we talk about.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point about, as people are learning over a lifetime, we know that the average age of an apprentice in construction infrastructure is in the mid-30s. So we're not talking, necessarily about people directly from high school. Not to say this model isn't, really well suited for them as well. But, we're all about building lots of opportunities along the pathway. Because I think we know that if you don't start an undergraduate degree by the time you're 25, your chance of doing so drops by about 80%. In the following decades. So it's important to give people a lot of options right the way through. One of the things that we hear a lot about is the research requirements for undergraduate degrees. Obviously, those don't exist for apprenticeship and industry training. How do you think degree-level apprenticeships reconcile that requirement for degrees to be research-led?
Well, the first thing is that degree-level apprenticeships do not remove the research element. They shift the context into the workplace, though. Learners undertake applied inquiry projects, reflective analysis, workplace capstone assessments, and meet degree-level research expectations that way. For example, instead of writing an essay about a problem, a learner might design and evaluate a new project management process on site or conduct a clinical case study in hospital. The rigor is still there, but it's directly tied to practice. That isn't to say that employees need to be researchers. At graduate level, there are many opportunities in the workplace for critical analysis, solution finding, and testing. The learners at level 7 will be quite autonomous, and support for research will come from the academic staff. So they're being work-based and having a focus and support from the provider is going to be the key. I think the thing to say here is the employer doesn't need to be the researcher. The learner will be the researcher and be supported by the provider.
And it's a really interesting point, and I think something that right throughout all of the pilots we've been grappling with is how do you organise these programs in a way that reflects employer capability? So, Emmolina, do you want to just make some observations about how we've considered employer capability in the mix?
Sure. So there are a couple of perspectives on this. Employers have an important role in the DLA, and they do in any kind of workplace and the workplace development. We have got thousands of employees already engaged in the apprenticeship and the industry trainings, and tens of thousands of learners has already touched on the workplace through clinical and professional placements, industry projects, and other forms of work integrated learnings. So nothing is new there, and nothing is new to the employers as well as to the learners. The real contribution that the employers make is through the current industry and professional practice, as well as the behavior expectations of the workplace. So these are the things that they do every day. And there is definitely a scope to lift the capabilities of the employers where we need it to, and that is the feature of our enabling works for the degree apprenticeship, which is coming out soon. It is possible to build these models in a way that are light touch for employers, and it is more a question of making choices about maximizing of the benefits for both employers and employees, learners. When we're looking at the capabilities as well as the supports in that space, we don't want the employers to come in and think about it as a burden to take the learners on board, but on the contrary, we want to talk about it is a benefits for the employers as well as the benefits for the employees. So when we consider the capabilities, we're not just think about, oh, you have to be such scale as employers to do this work, because we do recognize up to 95% of the business are small to medium business. That's where that we are working towards to probably that creating a toolkit or additional supports that where this degree level apprenticeship can benefit for both parties, not just, as a burden as such.
Yeah, fantastic, Emmolina. I mean, I think that's really encouraging that you both have been, and all of the pilots have been thinking about that need to support and work with employers where they are. One of the things I think we've picked up from the evaluations in the UK is how employers are often blown away by what their apprentices are bringing back to the workplace from the training that they're doing. Being able to bring together that off-job training and really contextualize it into the real world of running a business. This question might be a bit left field, but I think it does reflect some of the concerns that folks have about parity of STEAM in the tertiary education system and the culture more generally. But this question, Mike, should trades at level 4 be lifted to degree level?
No, I don't think so. Not universally. Some trades like automotive and carpentry have been operating for hundreds of years without a degree level study. Others like engineering and technology and surveying or advanced clinical practice clearly do. What is striking is that New Zealand is still at the very beginning of offering degree level programs in an apprenticeship form. Overseas, it's common to see engineering, surveying, business, and IT offered this way. Here we are still just in the pilot stage. So before we think about lifting trades, we should probably expand degree level apprenticeships where their fit is already obvious.
Absolutely. And I think one of the interesting things is that we've seen overseas, a real emphasis on this stuff happening at the university, in the university sector. Both of you come from the polytech sector, and obviously that's a really natural fit, I think, for the missions of your organisations in terms of your closeness to industry and the regions that you're working with, or the country as a whole, in the case of Open Polytech. But Emmolina, do you have any views on how ready you think the university sector is to take up these opportunities?
Well, I think probably not being aware, but actually the universities are more involved than most people realize. For example, the Teach First in New Zealand, the nurses practitioner trainings and practice-based masters are already effectively a way of DLA in the present. So the sectors, they know how to do this, and they've been doing this already. We've been keeping in touch with the champions in the university sectors and for these kind of models, but the real challenge is not the university readiness, it's actually the shifting of the whole system so that the work integrated learning is to be normalized, no longer to be in the pilot stage. That requires new funding schemes, the rules, the guidelines, the program approval processes, and explicitly recognize of the co-design with the employers, with the industry lead, with the cultural shifts, as well as a value that to be applied to the workplace-based research and as much as the lecture-based teaching. Having said that, there are real first movers advantage for the polytechs that are engaged in this work. They are building capability to support the work-based learnings, which they can repurpose for degree apprenticeship. And given the growth of the potential, it offers an obvious opportunities.
And certainly an opportunity for your organisations to give effect really to your mission in terms of supporting industry, working with industry, and meeting needs of learners right around the country. So interesting, I think we can tell a story about the enablers being in place and a real interest in the flexibility sitting there. But we have talked a lot about, these signals of legitimacy. So one of the questions we got, Mike, was why does the ministerial funding determination still define apprenticeships at level 4?
Look, it's a legacy of legislation and culture. The Education and Training Act restricts apprenticeships to level 4, reflecting outdated assumptions that apprenticeships equal trades. That framing hardwires a split between vocational and academic, which is unhelpful, really, in my opinion. I also think that there's a strong case for amending the Act to explicitly recognise degree-level apprenticeships as a valid form of work-based training and building the model more obviously into TC's plan guidance. These small changes would have a big impact. It'd make the degree-level apprenticeships look legitimate to providers, employers, and learners alike. But we probably need to get some runs on the board to make the case for the change first, though. So hence the pilots.
Sure. And I think, we've really seen this cultural cringe, cultural norms coming into play with the reforms to NCEA. Really strong messaging from some in the systems more generally about the differences between academic and vocational subjects, which I think we all agree are perhaps unhelpful distinctions, really. So turning to the pilots and some of the practical steps that are involved, Emmolina, what compromises do you think you've had to make along the way as you've been designing your pilot?
I think the only compromise I had is my sleep. But no, I don't think the pilot is really talking about the compromises like we have to pick and choose and to weigh in. It is more about building that system, that change how we able to do different things. And the DLAs actually offer a huge opportunity, as everyone already knows, is quite obvious. They allowed us to provide dual pathways and for learners more flexi ways and for them to study. And those who are already in the work and entering, from the study or from different career pathways and from different life milestones that I say they go through. And that requires a closer partnership with a professional and industry association that we have typically seen in a degree education. So these associations can help with recruitment, employer uplift, and as well as the ongoing support and for the wider industry lift. That all glories isn't to say that it is all plain sailing. So the funding does not yet provide in the dedicated role for those associations, so that potential is not fully realized in that way. And legislations are still required to be advanced program to be taught mainly in the research active academics rather than opening to the doors for the industry experts, which was advanced professional practice in the real industry. We have had to balance the vision of those requirements, and so far we run lots of those based at the heart of the goal of people's and industry massive support but we do want to see that more positive wave from the legislation side, the funding side, and the proper recognition of this.
For sure. And I think just that support, I just think about the support that Building Institute Aotearoa, Architectural Designers New Zealand and NZIQS have provided to these pilots. It's been really, really gratifying and really a good signal, I think, of how the potential that's in these models. One of the things that when we look internationally is we've seen shifts in the market for apprenticeship training. If you look to the UK, there has been over the last sort of decade or so a drop in the number of people doing traditional trades training. While they've had quite an increase in degree-level apprenticeships, the government over there is making some changes to respond to that. And in Germany, there's been quite a shift in terms of the weight of activity as some of the universities have started to step into a work-integrated space. Mike, what's your reflections on whether or not degree apprenticeships could compete with level 4 apprenticeships in New Zealand?
I don't think they're competitors, they're complements. Level 4 apprenticeships are the right entry point for many learners and occupations. The degree-level apprenticeships extend the pathway into supervisory and professional roles where degree-level theory and extended workplace learning are both needed. In practice, learners may move from a level 4 apprenticeship straight into a DLA. That creates a ladder, not a fork in the road. International evidence suggests it's a very effective way to keep talent developing inside industries and businesses. The reality is that the economy needs a mix of skills and competencies. The focus here is broadening access for people who are effectively not locked out of degree level study because of cost of living concerns, and make it impossible for many people to take a break from work to study.
Yeah, and certainly that pathwaying was an important theme. Those of you, we'll put it in the show, the sort of show notes that go with this. It's a really interesting podcast out of the US, Apprenticeship 2.0, and they've had a recent discussion around those pathway opportunities they see in the US and in Germany, but important here for us in New Zealand with our actually really quite flexible system that can support and enable those things if we get the settings right. An important part, I think, of pathwaying is recognition of prior learning. So, Emmolina, how do you think recognition of prior learning and recognition of current competency fits with degree apprenticeships?
Well, the RPL, or the recognition of prior learning, it is the central of making the DLA works. Many learners will enter with significant workplace experience, whether it's from level 4 apprenticeship, like what Mike just commented about, or from industry roles, or from informal trainings. The RPL will allow those skills to be formally recognized so that learner can shorten their pathways while they're still meeting the degree standards. What we need to do is to have a simpler, more flexible rules so that micro-credentials and RPLs can be stacked into the degree programs, which they can be more structured in that way. If we've done well, the RPL is both an efficient, measured, and equity lever, which particularly for Maori Pacific women and career changing for those who have traditional experience that carried to the road but not yet been captured, which could be captured in our DLAs.
Fantastic. Well, look, thanks to you both for taking the time just to work through all those questions. I think if we had tried to do that during the conference session, we would have taken away everyone's lunch and wouldn't have been very popular. So that was really fantastic. Did you, either of you, have any final thoughts? Perhaps to start with you, Emmolina, were there any final thoughts you wanted to share?
Well, I think that was the news that we just break today, and as well as the industry engagement and interest in how the DLA moving along, we know and has been known that the education always a bit slower to catch up with the industry required, which what I see that our DLAs actually will be a potentially a innovation in more innovative way to bridging that gaps. Because I mean, when you think about the industry needs and consider the education reactions, and that normally will have about 5-10 years of reflection, but the DLAs can perfectly fit in that way and to collaborate much closer with the industry requirements and with the industry supports in that way that the education will be self-evolve and develop as the need. So I do see there's a bright future, and hopefully our future works can get easier as we do, and I can have some nice sleep back.
That's really exciting, isn't it? And really invigorating. Mike, do you have any final thoughts?
Just to tautoko, Emmolina, watch this space. And for those of you that have got to this end of the video, if you're still here, you must be interested. And if the opportunity arises, please take part. The more of these that we have going, the more pressure we can put on the regulators to make changes, to make things better for us. And I have a real belief that these are a fantastic way to get people into high level of study that otherwise wouldn't consider it. And we get all those skills and knowledge available to us in a much richer format than we currently have at the moment.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mike. And I'm always really inspired when I finish talking to you guys on any number of opportunities. And again, like both really, I want to acknowledge, I think, about how much thought and effort you've each put into shaping this new model of education and training. Certainly with the other pilot partners, it's been a really impressive program of work. To pick up on Mike's point, those of you watching this recording have any other questions, please feel free to comment on those on the streaming site, and we can certainly follow up with you on those. And if you're interested in being involved in degree apprenticeships in any way, then please get in touch, and we look forward to the model going from strength to strength. So tēnei te mihi to both of you and to everybody out there listening. Kia ora and thank you.
Kia ora. Thanks, Brenden.
Thank you.